the last tile you need to complete a qualifying hand, you may declare a win by calling out and revealing your hand. This is referred to as going out, or alternatively, completing your hand. Remember that a qualifying hand must meet the requirements of at least one yaku. If your hand does not have any yaku, you will not be allowed to go out. You can either obtain the winning tile yourself, or you may obtain it from an opponent, and there's a different call you have to make depending on which is the case. If you are in Tenpai and the tile that you draw from the wall on your turn completes your hand, you may call out Tsumo to declare the win. This is known as going out off the wall. Lay all of your tiles face up on the table so that the other players may admire your work and confirm that the hand is valid. Then your hand must have its point value calculated. This is the part where you get to announce the names of all the yaku your hand satisfies, chanting the incantation, if you will. You'll hear more details about all of that in the scoring and yaku sections later in the video. Once the point value of your hand has been determined, all 3 other players must split that cost amongst themselves as payment to your score. The dealer pays twice as many points as the other players, but if you happen to be the dealer yourself, everyone pays you twice as many points. Here's a tip about going out off the wall. Remember that your hand needs to satisfy at least one yaku in order for you to be able to declare it as a winning hand. Well, if you haven't made any calls yet and your hand is completely closed, then being able to call Tsumo automatically counts as a yaku, and you may declare the win even if there is not a single other yaku in your hand. This is called a closed Tsumo. If you're just learning how to play, it's a good first yaku for you to memorize, because it gives you an easy way to guarantee that your hand will qualify for a win. If you're in Tenpai and the last tile you need to complete your hand is discarded by an opponent, you may call out Ron before the next player draws to steal the tile and declare the win. This can be referred to as going out off an opponent, off a discard, or off the table. The player who discarded your winning tile is said to have discarded into your hand, or dealt into your hand. Note that if your hand is closed, calling Ron does not count as opening it, even though you are technically stealing an opponent's discard. Lay your tiles face up to confirm the win, then announce your hand's yaku and calculate its score. There is no need to physically pick up your opponent's discard in this case. Unlike Tsumo, when you call Ron against an opposing player, that player alone is responsible for paying the entire amount of points your hand is worth. If you are not the dealer, there's no difference in the amount of points that a dealer or non-dealer would pay you. If you are the dealer, anyone would have to pay you more points. If a player wants to call Ron on a discard, they are always given priority over any other player that calls Pon, Chi, or Kan on it, no matter who made their call first. If possible, multiple players are allowed to call Ron on the same discard. Most often, the calling player who is closest to the discarding player in counterclockwise order is given priority. But sometimes, if a rule called double Ron is in effect, both players win, and the discarding player is required to pay each winner the point value of their hand. If all 3 other players call Ron on the same discard, one of 3 things can happen. Under the rule of triple Ron, all 3 players win, and the unfortunate discarding player pays everybody. If triple Ron is not in effect, then in some rules, the next player counterclockwise from the discarder gets priority again. In other rules, no winner can be determined, and the hand ends in a draw. No matter what the rules, though, in all cases of multiple Ron, all calling players are required to reveal their hands to confirm that their calls were valid. Unlike a closed Tsumo, Calling Ron by itself does not normally give your hand an automatic yaku, except under very specific circumstances. So if your hand does not currently meet any yaku on its own, and if the discarded tile would not cause your hand to start qualifying for a yaku by virtue of composition, you are not allowed to call Ron against an opponent who discards your weight. However, there is another way you can guarantee a yaku for your hand whether you go out by Tsumo or Ron, and that's by utilizing the reach system. Riichi is a rule unique to the Japanese version of Mahjong, and it's what lends the game its alternative name of Riichi Mahjong. In English, the word reach is often used in its place, but this is purely for the sake of it being easier to say, as Riichi is entirely a Japanese word with an unrelated etymology. What the reach rule does is allow you to announce a commitment to the current composition of your hand, and essentially make a bet that you'll be able to complete it. In return, you'll have secured at least one yaku for your hand ahead of time if you do complete it. This action is sometimes referred to as declaring a ready hand. There are a few requirements you must meet before you may ready your hand. You must be in tenpai, you must have at least 1,000 points, and your hand must be completely closed with no open melds. If you satisfy all three of these requirements on your turn, you may declare a ready hand by calling out Riichi or Reach. Choose a tile to discard that leaves your hand in tenpai, and place it sideways in the next spot in your discard pile. Then, a bet of 1,000 points is subtracted from your score. These points are now considered to be on the table. If you're playing with point sticks, place a 1,000 point stick above your discard pile and parallel with it to represent this. The next player to win a hand claims all of the points on the table for their score in addition to the point value of their hand. So if you win the hand after declaring reach, you'll get your deposit back. If another player wins, your deposit is lost to them. Once you declare reach, you are no longer allowed to call tiles for open melds or change your hand's composition in any way. You have committed your hand to its current weights. Also, after declaring reach, you must take the very first opportunity to go out that arises. As soon as you draw one of your weights, you must call Tsumo. As soon as an opponent discards one of your weights, you must call Ron, whichever comes first. You may choose to pass up a chance to go out during reach, but in doing so you are putting yourself in a disadvantageous state called furiten, which I'll describe in the next section. What isn't a choice, however, is that any tiles you draw on subsequent turns that do not immediately complete your hand, you must discard. This obligation prevents you from holding on to new tiles that could have been used to increase the value of your hand, or to give you a more likely weight. So you need to make sure your hand is really, really ready before you commit to a reach. Furthermore, there's an additional risk in that if you have the misfortune of drawing not your weight but one of your opponent's weights during reach, you have no choice but to discard it, with no way to avoid dealing into their hand. There is an added bonus in store for a player who goes out after declaring reach. That player may take the bottom tile out from underneath each face-up Dora indicator in the dead wall, including con Dora indicators, and flip it face up to serve as an additional Dora indicator. If you have any copies of the tile it indicates in your winning hand, they all become Dora as well before your hand score is calculated. They are called reverse Dora, or Ura Dora, which literally means the Dora on the reverse side. And the nice thing about this rule is, only a player who has declared reach is allowed to take advantage of the Ura Dora. So if you declare reach and another player who didn't declare reach wins the hand instead, they do not get to flip the Uradora indicators. They are solely your bonus for overcoming the risks associated with reach. Although you are not allowed to change the composition of your hand after declaring reach, If you enter Reach with a triplet as one of your melds, and you draw the fourth copy of that tile during your Reach, you may be allowed to declare Con with that tile instead of discarding it, and turn the triplet into a quad. The procedure is identical to the formation of any other closed quad. Set the tiles aside, draw from the dead wall, and flip up the next door indicator. If the tile you draw from the dead wall does not complete your hand or another quad, you must discard it. Then your Reach continues as normal. However, you must remember that you are only allowed to do this if creating the closed quad has absolutely no effect on your hand's weights or its other melds. As a general rule of thumb, it is always safe to turn a triplet of honor tiles into a quad during Reach, because there is no other way those tiles can be used. But if you have a triplet of number tiles, if there is any way at all for its members to be considered part of a sequence, part of a pair, or in a weight for either, you may not turn it into a quad. Let me show you an example of what I'm talking about. Suppose that this hand is in Reach. On the right, the hand has already completed 2 triplets of honor tiles and a triplet of number tiles. On the left, the tiles are currently arranged so that it looks like the 2 so triplet is the 4th meld, and the hand is in a pair weight on the 3 so. So what would happen if you were to draw the last remaining 2 so at this point? Well, you would not be allowed to declare Con. And the reason for that is there is another way for these tiles to be arranged. If you look at the hand like this, now it has completed 3 melds and a pair, and it's in a 2-sided weight on the 1-4 so to complete this sequence. If you tried to declare Con here, all of these 2 so tiles would be forced to act as a quad. Forming a sequence with the 2-3 so would no longer be possible, and the 2-sided weight would vanish. But remember, declaring Reach means you have committed to your hand's current composition and weights, and that means you are not allowed to declare any quad that would change either. But over here, the 9 wand tiles are completely separate from this whole mess by virtue of both their suit and their value. They may be turned into a quad safely. And the honor tiles are always safe to quad. This is a rule that you really need to try to keep in mind, because you can be hit with a stiff penalty for breaking it. Remember, if declaring Con during Reach would cause you to leave Tempai, change your weights, or make any possible interpretation of your hand's melds no longer possible, it is not allowed.